If you'd like to talk about your own Bigfoot encounter, or if you're looking for help from a Bigfoot investigator in your area, email me at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. No Sasquatch were harmed in the recording of this podcast.
My name is Brian Terrell. I'm with Red Dirt Cryptid Investigations out of Northwest Oklahoma. I like to consider myself a field researcher.
Brian, welcome to Bigfoot Crossroads. How are you?
I am great. Thanks for having me.
A fellow Okie. Are you a lifelong Oklahoman?
Yeah. I was actually born in Enid, and I lived in Okmulgee for a while I was going to college, and then I lived in Oklahoma City, and now I'm back in Enid. So.
Oh, all right. Well, how does a school teacher from Enid, Oklahoma, end up chasing monsters?
By seeing things. When I was a kid growing up, I spent a lot of time down at my grandparents' farm, and we kind of lived down by Dover, Oklahoma, and Cimarron River was right there. And when I was a kid, I used to just kind of run up and down the creek. We had a spring-fed creek that flowed through our farm. We were very fortunate, and one day I found a big track down there, and I was baffled by it. I was probably, I'm thinking 11 years old at the time. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember spending that summer trying to trap whatever it was, and failed miserably. But fast forward to about the time I'm 35, I was just drinking beer, watching TV, and some Bigfoot show was on, and I saw basically an identical track on this Bigfoot show, and I about spit my beer out because I realized that was what I'd seen back when I was a kid down at the farm. And that's when the realization that I wasn't alone down there kind of came all, flooding to me. And that's kind of where my obsession with Bigfoot and then later other cryptids came from.
Did you hear about things growing up from other people and the locals and stuff?
Well, I spent a lot of time dwelling on that. When I was a kid, I remember, some of the old men that, at the co-op and stuff, when I was riding around with my granddad, joking around about, seeing Bigfoots and stuff like that down on Kingfisher Creek and, down by Kingfisher. And, I wish that I could have asked more questions at the time. I was just kind of ignoring them, you know how young folks are.
Right.
And coulda, shoulda, woulda. But, later on is when my interest really started peaking up. As an adult, and a man, you head to the woods and you start doing some hunting. And, you start finding things that are just unexplainable. I've always kind of considered myself an amateur tracker. And, you get out there and you start finding things like, uprooted trees. That was one thing that just totally messed with my head. I was down at one of our farms and, I saw what I thought was like an armadillo hole. And so I went over to kind of inspect it, and I found that it wasn't an armadillo hole at all. There was a tree that had been there, and it had been pulled up out of the ground. And you could see roots and stuff like that kind of sticking out. And it looked like it happened within a week or two, but I looked all around and the tree was gone. The only thing that I could come up with was that something had pulled that tree. And I'm, looking at some of the surrounding trees around it, I'm going to guess that tree was probably 3 or 4 inches around. And something had pulled this thing up out of the ground and carried it off. I actually started at that area, started making a circle, working my way out. I never found it. It was just something had carried that thing away.
Wow.
And this was in an area that was surrounded by trees. There was no way somebody could get down there with a Jeep and a winch or something like that. So unless somebody, brought in a helicopter and lowered a winch line or something, There's no human explanation for that tree being missing. But, you start to find things like that, and, you just scratch your head, and, you just kind of like, there's really no other explanation for these things,
I call it the 50-50 rule. In my experiences, you ultimately get to a point where really good evidence comes down to a 50-50 chance. It has to either be a human or a Bigfoot. And you start kind of looking into, well, what is the possibility of it being a human? And what you're talking about right now is like a perfect example, because if you can't get a vehicle down there and there's no signs of any other trees suffering the same fate, so to speak, is somebody going to come in there with a helicopter and pluck out one single tree and fly off with it? Of course not.
Yeah.
So, you have to look like, what else can it be if there's no fallen tree there, but you have evidence of a tree once standing there?
Yeah.
What they do with these trees, if they are in fact building these limb structures and creating these formations, do you have any ideas about why or what they might mean?
Well, that's the funny thing is I've never really found a whole lot of tree structures in western Oklahoma. I'm not like you'll find down southeastern Oklahoma. So that's some of the differences that you'll kind of stumble on from, our Bigfoots versus southeastern. They're not very vocal, and they really don't build a whole lot of tree structures. And that's one of the reasons why I've kind of leaned towards the whole theory that the tree structures are boundary markers for different clans of Bigfoot, because we don't have the large volumes of Bigfoot, I think, up in this area, and I just don't think they're necessary up here.
What kind of Bigfoot activity do you hear about in that area, like report-wise and stuff?
Well, if you're talking about in all of northwestern Oklahoma, you've got your occasional, roadside encounters like you'll get just about anywhere else. You'll hear about, people seeing them, within close proximity of the rivers. I think that, because we have less trees, and the trees that we do have are closer to the rivers and the water sources, I think they stick closer to those. There's less of them out here, but I think they're a little bit easier to find, because we don't have national forests over here. They're just, the forests kind of follow the rivers, but, we do get an occasional, braiding of the horse's hair, or, livestock deprivation, that kind of stuff. A lot of times hunters will see them. I think that probably the most common that you really get is they get busted coming into town to dig into trash. Mm-hmm. You hear a lot of stories from people that have seen them on the outskirts of major towns. And I think they're taking, I think they're getting into our trash. I think they figured out that our trash is a non-exhaustible food supply for them. And if they send in the small ones instead of the great big ones, I think if anybody was to actually see a 6.5 foot tall creature, a person looking thing all in black, they probably wouldn't think anything of it.
Now, you started up Red Dirt Cryptid Investigations.
Yeah.
You have a partner with that?
Well, I've got several guys that work with me. I started it, and I had a couple of guys that, had some shared interest. My buddy Jeff Hatfield, he goes with me on a lot of my investigations. So does Micah Doan. And I've got like a whole bunch of people that I message, and they give me leads all the time. So, and I would kind of consider those people, they're part of my intel group for sure. You get a circle of people around you, and it really helps when you're trying to stay on top of what's going on in the area.
What made you decide to take that leap and start up an actual organization?
I wanted more information on what was going on in my area, and there wasn't anything. We had some groups in other parts of Oklahoma, but at the time when I started it, I wasn't aware of anything in northwestern Oklahoma. And for the most part, I think your average Joe just thought there wasn't anything going on down there. You could say, well, there's not nearly as much going on, but there's still activity up here. So I just thought, we needed some kind of presence here so that, we could, amass data or information. And I personally am real big on sharing said information. And so, that's why I started the website with the interactive map, so that people could see, where all of our case files are. And of my 157 case files, all but 3 of them are actually, I'll tell you anything you want to know about them. They're kind of public,
Yeah.
That's my big thing is, we should be sharing. And that's kind of one of my pet peeves is we've got all these researchers out here in all these different areas, and, they've got their files, but they're not sharing the information with other people. And I really think we could accomplish a lot if we would all just kind of get together in a cooperative effort and share what we know.
Right.
Different areas of the country respond differently to, open conversation about cryptids and the things that go bump in the night, For instance, if you got 2 guys talking about, Bigfoot in Enid, Oklahoma, there's and people around you are going to think you need to go and have a straitjacket put on. But if you're down in, Hanabi or maybe Broken Bow or something like that down southeastern Oklahoma, nobody even thinks anything of it.
Right.
And from what I've been told, I don't know firsthand, but I've been told by some people that I know, you get up into Washington State, Northern California, Oregon, people just generally accept that they're real. It's not even speculative up there.
Yeah, I've done a lot of stuff down in South Central Oklahoma, a little bit of Western Oklahoma, I guess, if you want to call it, down around Anadarko. And
I know what you're talking about.
In those areas, it's just accepted. I mean, everybody's seen one. Everybody knows somebody who's seen one or had a story or anything. But geographically, the terrain is very similar to where you're at. It's not a big, heavily forested place. Most of the tree cover is by the creeks and the rivers or the canyons that run through there. It seems like the Bigfoot just run the canyons mostly.
Right.
And you do get a lot of stories of road crossings and a lot of stories of coming into town and raiding trash cans.
Yeah.
How prolific do you think it is for these things to come in around towns and around people at nighttime?
Well, I think that it happens all the time under our noses. I wouldn't be surprised if, if they raid city dumps on a regular basis. Anywhere there's food, especially free food, if there's a place where they can sneak in and get it. I actually took a report from a lady in Wewoka, and she swore up and down that they would come around and get in the trash cans on the night before trash day.
Huh.
Because they knew that the trash was going to be collected the next day. I mean, this is how smart they are.
I mean, that's really interesting. I've heard the same thing about the park down in Sulphur, actually. They would know when to hit the trash cans.
The people that think that these things are just dumb animals, the behavior proves that wrong. They're pretty slick, and I think the big ones, like the really big alpha males, anything above 8 feet, I think that they probably stay out of the towns. But I think the juveniles and some of the smaller females, I mean, if you saw somebody, you or I are a little bit different, but if your average Joe was to look out the window and at night, at 1 o'clock in the morning and see somebody digging in a trash can, we'd probably just think it was some homeless bum or some tweaker or something.
Yeah.
They get away with it all the time. Yeah. And it happens a lot. There's over there at, where Stinchcombe Wildlife Management area is over in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There was a report of one digging in the dumpster over there behind the donut shop.
Huh.
Yeah. But I just think it happens under our noses constantly. And they're, as long as they are not ridiculously large. We just assume that there's some person in a black hoodie and black sweatpants or something, if we see them at all.
Well, I mean, how many times does somebody hear, some sort of commotion at their trash can at night and just assume that it's a raccoon or, a stray dog or something? They don't even get up and look out the window.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no telling what they might see out there.
Yeah. Farmers have been blaming, missing feed and stuff like that on raccoons for, decades now. I grew up in a family of farmers, and, we blame the coons for everything that come up missing. But I do believe their population is on the rise.
You do?
It just seems like we're getting more and more maybe it's the internet, maybe not, but it just seems like the food sources are a lot more abundant than they were back in, let's say, like the 1950s. It would make sense that their population would increase. And the fact that I think that they're coming into towns more often is another sign of it.
What's the most recent report you've had?
The latest one that I know of was that sighting down by Lawton of that white Bigfoot. And I don't even have all the details on that. There was 3 of them, and one of them was a white one.
What do you think is the deal with the white ones? Do you think that is something that happens with age, or is it just albinoism, or just a natural hair color?
The whole albino thing, okay? A lot of people, if they see one that's white, they just naturally go there. Albino animals really do not survive in the wild, although Bigfoots could be the exception to that. Who knows? But I would have to say that the lion's share of the white Bigfoots are just older Bigfoots, or possibly they're just born that way. There's a lot of speculation on these Bigfoot that are white and being, like elders. I've heard stories from some Native American elders about some of the older Bigfoot, going around certain regions and visiting different family groups, basically just relaying information. I don't know what kind of information. Maybe they're just spreading the local gossip. Don't really know what they're doing, but I've been told that some of them are elders, and not all of them are giants. Some of them are like 8 feet tall, and they're just white, and they could be a lot bigger, but they're not. They're just old.
What's the strangest report you've ever gotten involving Bigfoot activity?
That's actually a loaded question, but the first one that comes into my mind was I had a lady reach out to me and was telling me about a Bigfoot that was up, trying to remember, this has been a couple years ago. I want to say it was up by Jay, Oklahoma, in northeastern Oklahoma. And that's kind of up there by the Grand Lake, south of the Grand Lake. And the report is that there was a Bigfoot going around wearing a red hat, like some kind of hat that they had found, and it was wearing this red hat. I thought that was very peculiar. And according to this individual, there had been multiple people see this thing. Of course, if it's wearing a red hat, it's of course going to draw everybody's attention to it. But I thought that was pretty peculiar.
That's really weird. I mean, you were just, talking about how albinos don't last in the wild very long. I mean, a red hat isn't a good thing to have on in the wild either.
Well, it is entirely possible that they don't realize if they see in a different light spectrum than we do, which is generally accepted. Maybe they don't realize that a red hat like that stands out to us. Who knows?
What's the most active area you've been to?
Well, that would be down. It's a certain area that I kind of go to occasionally, but I'll tell you, it's down in by Broken Bow Lake. I'm not going to get too terribly specific, but yeah, we went out there one time and just kind of picked a random, campsite. And yeah, I would say that we've been out there 8 times, and of the 8 times, we've had activity 4 times.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, one night it it was pretty scary. I was sleeping out there in a hammock with a tarp over it, and I had what I thought was a couple of juveniles come into camp, and one of them got within about 15 feet of me, scared the bejeebers out of me. It was nerve wracking. So, but it was an awesome experience looking back on it. At the time, I was scared. I ain't gonna lie.
Why do you think it was a juvenile?
Well, it was after when I look back on the whole, I didn't know it at the time, but there was two of them, and one was making this mouth popping noise. It was about 30 yards into the woods towards the north. And it was just sitting there. Every once in a while, it'd make this loud popping noise with its mouth, kind of like when you do that thing with the top of your mouth and your tongue.
Mm-hmm.
And about every 5 to 10 minutes, it would do that. But the other, and it seemed to be kind of stationary. I mean, it moved around a little bit. I could hear it walking every once in a while. But there was another one that seemed to be walking kind of circles around the camp. And it came in, it got into our trash, but fun fact, it actually didn't, it put all the trash back, didn't make a mess, but it did inspect the trash, and it inspected one of our coolers, which we heard open the lid, the old Coleman coolers, when they open them up, they have the plastic hinges and they go, Arr!
Right.
We got to hear that, and then it was actually nice enough when it was done. It shut the lid and left. But about 4:45 in the morning, I would say about 45 minutes before daylight started to hit, from the north, I heard this very loud, deep vocalization, and it just made this loud "bwah" noise. And at that point, the two that were there, they basically took off and they started walking off towards the north. And I later figured, it just dawned on me, that was mama or daddy telling them to, come on, it's time to go home. The sun's coming up, But that was that was 2019. And man, that was exciting. I mean, I really had a great experience down there. We just picked that place with dumb luck,
Uh-huh.
And but we've had several creepy encounters down there, and that whole area down there is just awesome. I love going down there. I just wish it wasn't so far for me.
You said that it checked out your trash or went through it or whatever. What exactly happened? How do you know it was going through your trash? Just you heard it going through the trash?
Well, one of the guys had brought like some of those little bags of chips,
Mm-hmm.
The ones that you like have for lunch or you give them to kids.
Right.
And he had several of those and ate them, and you could hear whatever it was crinkling those little bags of chips. I mean, everything was so quiet that night. You could hear really good. You get out here in Western Oklahoma and the wind blows even during the nighttime. So that's one of the things that I just love about southeastern Oklahoma and the tall trees is the wind is just not really a factor over there. I mean, it's still there, but it's so much quieter and more peaceful. And you could hear this thing walking around very gently, bipedally. You could hear it walking, and you could occasionally hear it, crunching and leaf matter or, on sticks and stuff. And that's actually what scared me was I think it was actually creeping up on me to look and see what I was. And it stepped on a stick and it cracked the stick. And when it did that, it actually grunted in what sounded like disgust. It was like it stepped on the stick and went crack and went, ugh. Like you or I would be like, kind of curse under our breath.
Right. Damn it.
Yes, exactly. But that's exactly what it felt like. It just felt like it was just like, oh crap, I just ghosted myself.
Yeah.
And of course, that's when I came out of my hammock. I mean, you've never seen a fat boy fly out of a hammock that fast. And, I didn't have a shell in the chamber of my pistol, and I jacked a shell in. And when I come out of there, I heard it run away very quickly on 2 feet. And I was cussing and screaming. Looking back on it, I kind of feel bad because I think it was a juvie. But it scared the bejeebers out of me.
How long did the activity go on that night?
From like 1 to 4:45. I was up almost all night, and then even after they left, I couldn't go to sleep until the sun was actually way in the sky. And it was a night to remember. Let's just say that. It was super exciting.
I just find it kind of fascinating. I'm sure people listening, especially ones who haven't experienced a night like that, will be thinking, oh, just raccoons, a bear, something like that. But wildlife doesn't do that for 3.5 hours. They come in, smell humans, and haul ass. They don't stick around for hours going through everything and messing with stuff and sneaking around.
Yeah, I think they were just curious kids. Another way that we actually know that it wasn't raccoons or hogs or something like that is, I told you that I heard the cooler lid open. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, at the time when I was in the hammock, I thought that the cooler was sitting on the ground by my buddy Micah's truck tire. And so I told myself at the time, I was like, well, that could be coons getting in your cooler, blah, 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 Got up the next morning and found out Micah had taken the cooler and put it in the back of his pickup in the middle.
Oh, wow.
So whatever it was, if it would have been a coon or something like that, we would have heard it climbing up in the back of Micah's truck. So whatever it was reached up and over into the back of his pickup truck and opened the lid.
Oh, wow.
So apparently they didn't see fit to take any sodas or I think it was like little squares of pre-wrapped cheese slices. That was about the only thing that would happen to be in that cooler other than ice. So
nothing was missing?
Nope. Nothing was missing.
Huh.
Yeah, they didn't take anything. It was almost like they weren't hungry. They were just curious.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I think it was just some juveniles. And, and when I did hear them walking, I didn't hear the ground shaking footsteps, that you hear in some other encounters. You could hear them. It just sounded like a person walking around, and they were very soft. And then there was the other one, which I think might've been like the older sibling that was over there doing the mouth popping noises. And so I think that the older sibling was off just outside of camp trying to get the other sibling to go. And the other sibling was possibly being stubborn. Now, this is all speculation on my part, but
right.
When you spend as much time thinking about what happened that night as I have, you eventually, you work out all these scenarios in your head. And that's the best one that I can come up with.
Was that the most frightening night you've had?
Yeah, it really kind of was. I've had a couple of daytime dogman sightings, but as far as nighttime stuff, I had another night that was kind of in the same area that was really creepy. That one was creepy for different reasons. It was raining, and it was, they were making that mechanical whistle that people report. Mm-hmm. I'm from Northwest Oklahoma, and that just creeped me out. That was loud and weird, and I didn't know what to make of that. And then we were staying in a tent that night, and something came up and shook the tent. That was really weird. And then I heard some tree knocks off in the distance.
Hold on. Something shook the tent you were sleeping in?
Well, I was asleep, but my buddy Micah was not. And I was out cold, and he said that something came up and he said it felt like something just reached up and grabbed it was a dome tent, if that tells you. You know how there's the crisscross? He said it felt like something just reached up, grabbed the top of the tent, and just shook it. And he said he didn't hear anything walking or anything. He said something shook it. And we got up the next morning, and he told me about it whenever I woke up a little bit later. And we got up the next morning, we looked all around, and nothing had hit the tent because there was nothing around our tent. We cleared the area before we set it up. And, but this, whatever it was, I guess just shook the tent. Probably just trying to harass us. I don't know.
Dogman.
Yeah.
I'm hearing more and more reports about dogmen in the state of Oklahoma. So tell me, what have you experienced with them?
The first one that I saw was in 2007, and it was I actually did a YouTube video on it. If you guys want to watch it, it's on there. It's called Brian's Dogman Encounter. I actually take you out to the place where I saw it. But I was just driving to one of our family farms, and I looked out the window, and there it was. It was sitting there, and I remember I kind of glanced over at it. And, I thought, well, that's odd. That's a really big dog. I was sitting there thinking, well, that's awful big. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, it's like, it's not a good idea to have, a wolf dog in cattle country.
Right.
The breed is known for retaining its wildness. But, I turned and I looked forward at the road, and that's when my brain was kind of doing the math, but my brain finally just kind of punched the numbers, and I was like, that dog was about 65 yards or so away from me. That dog is massive. It's absolutely massive, and then I turned around and looked, and it was running away, and it ran away to the north and towards the tree line. And I was just sitting there like, what in the damn hell did I just see? Well, this was 2007. I didn't hear about dogmen until like 10 years later. I never even heard the term. But, I didn't know what I was looking at. And my main concern at the time was my brother, my younger brother. He at the time, he was real active in hunting coons with his dogs and stuff. And that's what I was concerned about. So I called my brother up, and, and of course, I'm sitting there at the top of the hill fixing to hit send. And I'm like, how am I going to explain this to my brother? Do you have it? If you have brothers, that, you can't say something like, I just saw a giant wolf,
right.
Without them giving you a bunch of crap, So I'm sitting here on the phone trying to explain to my brother. It's like, no, this was like a really big dog. It was like really, as a matter of fact, that's what we called it. We called it the wolf dog for a long time because we didn't know what else to call it, And but later on, I realized that that's what I had seen. But it was a big boy. I think that people report bigger ones, but it was definitely large enough that I knew it was not normal. At the time when I saw it, I just thought that this was some kind of dog that was affected with that gigantism, Mm-hmm. Sometimes people are affected with that, and they grow to like 7.5 feet tall or whatever. And it's, I don't know that you'd call it a disease, but it's definitely some kind of disorder.
Right. Some sort of genetic mutation.
I just thought, that must have been what I seen. I seen a mutant dog, And for years, that's just kind of how I explained it. The second one that I saw was a lot smaller than that one. This one here was, if I'm 6'1" and sitting down, its head was probably up to my chin. Okay. I mean, it was that big. I figure it probably, it might have gone 500 pounds. Yeah, I mean, when it was sitting there, it was sitting with its butt on the ground and its chest up, and that's the one thing that I remember as being odd, was that the dog was just buff. Most wolves, if you look at them from the front, they almost look malnourished, scrawny. Their legs almost touch each other because their chest is so narrow. This dog's arms were like out there, And you know how some of those pit bull type dogs, you know, they got all the muscular chest and stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Multiply that by about 10. This dog was just, you know, He-Man dog.
Short hair or long hair?
Long hair, black. You know, the sunlight was kind of on him, and it almost looked like it had a tint of brown in it, but black. It was like 95% black. It had a longer muzzle, pointy ears. There was hair sticking out of the ears. I noticed his tail when he was running away. It was an incredibly bushy tail, long tail, long tail. And he was really hairy. Now, I never did see him stand up. You know, I never did see his hands. Mm-hmm. So, you know, so I guess, you know, the dogmen fall into different categories. I think they call that a type 1 dogman, where it's just basically a overgrown wolf. But yeah, it spooked me pretty good. And we my brother and I actually, about 6 months later, I think we had an encounter with him again when we were coyote hunting, but we never laid eyes on him, and we just kind of wonder about that.
So was the second one, did it look similar?
The second one was all jet black, another daytime sighting, on the road. He was actually in the road when I saw him. He was crouched down, and you know how Wile E. Coyote like creeps up on stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Imagine one of these things. It had a really long body. The tail was really long and bushy, and the thing was sneaking up on something in the road, and you could tell. And I just kind of let the gas off of my vehicle, and I just kind of kept coasting, and I coasted really close to him, and then all of a sudden it looked at me, and I could tell I scared it, and it bolted into the grass. The thing that was really different about that one was it had a really weird head on it. It had bushy hair too, but the muzzle was kind of like short, and its head looked funny. And I got to looking later on, you know, when you're researching this stuff, and it looked more like a class 3 dogman, which they kind of look like a hyena. But instead of having the hyena coloring like some people report, mm-hmm. This one was all solid black. But I would say that this thing was probably in the 200, 250 pound range. It was a big critter, but, you know, I've seen actual dogs larger. Weird thing was it had a longer body, similar to a cougar. Yeah. The body kind of, you know how the body on a cougar is like stretched, kind of like a weenie dog a little bit. Yeah. I noticed I thought that was peculiar about it. But I actually stopped on the road where it was, and I got out and started walking over there trying to get a better look at it, but it was gone. And then all of a sudden it just dawned on me that getting out of the vehicle was a stupid idea. And but I was just like so mind blown by the looks of it. It looked deformed. Huh. I mean, you know, it just
didn't look right.
It didn't look right. Something about the head, and then like I said, the body was too long for a canine. It was just really weird. But I think what I was looking at now was a juvenile dogman, you know, a younger one. Huh. You know how some people, you know, they grow into their arms and legs, and right? Whatnot. I guess that's what I was looking at. I don't know. You tell me.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm still confused.
Do you get a lot of dogman reports?
Yeah, I've never counted them up. As far as like comparing them, we get a lot more Sasquatch reports than we do dogman reports. But the dogman reports are, you know, they have a lot of consistency. I've actually had a one report of a guy not too terribly. Well, he called it in not too long ago, but I think it happened in 2020. where this dog, he thought it was just a wolf dog on the side of the road, and it began chasing him on all fours, and then I guess he started speeding up, and I guess it stood up on its hind legs and took off bipedally, and it actually was keeping pace with him at about 55 mile an hour.
Wow.
And it actually looked at him and kind of smiled.
That's creepy.
Yeah, well, these dogmen are known for smiling at people. And but yeah, it creeped him out pretty good. But apparently it couldn't keep pace with him at 80. So yeah. So, but that, you do get an occasional dogman story, but I think people out there, your average Joe, is a lot more likely to tell you a story about a Bigfoot that they saw than they are about a dogman. As a matter of fact, I heard rumors that there was a bunch of people who were reporting dogman encounters out by Woodward or Visay area. And supposedly, I don't know really what happened. It's total mystery. I heard that some of the other cryptid researchers were going to go over there and have like a town hall meeting type thing, similar to what the Finding Bigfoot boys used to do. And I guess some news outlet or something got hold of it, and they started calling, asking questions. And I guess the people didn't. They were like, I ain't going on TV. And they just shut the whole thing down right then and there. But I think there's a lot more activity than what people realize. And I think people that see them from a distance off probably just tell themselves, well, it was just a big dog at a distance. It's a little harder when you see a Sasquatch standing up to blow that off, I think, from a distance. But I mean, I'm not an expert. Nobody's an expert. But from what I've kind of seen, I think that the default mode for, running and moving around for a dogman, I think it's on all fours. And, but I think that the Sasquatch, it's kind of 50-50. But it seems like to me that, most of the reports that I get, they start out walking on all fours,
I mean, if you think about other animals, not, don't give me any hate comments, folks. I don't know that they're animals or humans or whatever. I'm just saying that in the animal kingdom, a lot of things that are comfortable running around on four legs the majority of the time will stand up on two legs whenever they see a human or some sort of thing that they feel might be a threat, to make themselves look as big as possible and everything, and to get a better look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always thought that maybe Bigfoot, dogman, things like that are doing the same thing, sort of.
Yeah. Well, it just makes sense, if we're trying to get a better look at something, we might just stand up on our tiptoes to see a little better. And, I think that's pretty common. But I've noticed, though, that a lot of the reports, most of the reports that you hear about with dogmen, you hear about them being on all fours and sometimes on two legs. But, I would say that a vast majority of the Bigfoot reports that you get, they report them only being on two legs.
Right.
So at least that's from what I've seen.
Have you gotten any reports of thunderbirds or anything like that?
Yeah. I actually had a guy call me not too terribly long ago. I'm going to say about 3-4 months ago. And he reported, and I don't remember when that was. It was not, I remember he was telling me that he was pretty young at the time, but I'm not going to quote the date, but it was probably 15 years ago, that they, down by Watonga, Watonga, he reported a giant black bird that was flying around, and I guess it was in close proximity to that river that flows to the south and to the, I think it might be the North Canadian. That's one of the Canadians, but to the south and to the west of Winoka. not Winoka, Watonga. Sorry. But anyway, yeah, he reported that. And there's other flying cryptids out there too. There's reports of pterodactyl type creatures that people are reporting. There's two of them that I know of were down by Stinchcombe Wildlife Management Area. And these people were seeing them after dark. They're flying around. And there's also a very interesting report that I've heard about from two different people. And supposedly this happened out by Vici, Oklahoma. I don't know the whole story, but there was an oil field guy or some kind of roustabout guy who was up on one of those tank batteries. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. That's got the 3 tanks and then the 2 or 3 tanks and then the separator, the tall, skinny one. And they've got that set of steps going up and then the railing.
Yeah.
Supposedly, the story I heard is that he was up on top of there at night, late at night, and he was gauging the tanks. And he suddenly just got attacked by some kind of giant winged bird from the air. And supposedly he dropped down onto the platform and I guess the rails kind of protected him. And he rolled off and hit the ground and got up and ran to his truck, got away.
Wow.
But God, I want to talk to that guy, you know?
Yeah.
I wish I had $1 for every secondhand story, you know? I mean,
full discretion, I'm not some sort of wussy or anything, but birds freak me out a little bit. Specifically birds flying close to my head or inside of a building. So like the idea to be like up on one of those things in the dark and then a bird, some sort of giant bird attacks you from above.
Yeah.
Oh man, I would have peed my pants for sure.
And you know, you think about it, say for instance that these things, that there still is some kind of breeding population of these things, small or whatnot. What if they are completely nocturnal? Now, you take like the pterosaurs and the pterodactyls. We have a natural precedent for them. They're in the fossil record.
Right.
There are still reports of those things being alive, you know, over in Indonesia and other countries and even South America. What if there is a small breeding population around here? My oldest case file is from 1889, and it's a rancher down at Cole County that supposedly shot one of these things. And he basically had it on display for a couple of weeks, and all the townspeople would come out to look at it. Finally, it started to stink, and so they buried it.
Huh.
You know? But what if they only come out at night? What if they primarily feed on deer or maybe, you know, a calf or something, you know? What if their metabolism is slow like an alligator or a crocodile? What if they only have to eat, you know, like 2 deer, a month or something ridiculous like that? It's really hard to, you know, try and predict their behavior when we know absolutely nothing about them. But all I'm going to say is that it's possible, you know.
Where do you think they would like nest or roost or whatever?
Well, I don't know. The first thing that I thought of was, you know, maybe, you know, some of these little short step mountains that we've got around here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe they go, I mean, it would make sense that they would, you know, have some of the similar characteristics to other birds. Maybe, you know, a cave up on top of a cliff. I mean, you know, the Black Mesa area is full of that kind of habitat, Glass Mountains area. You know, you get down around Quartz Mountain, the Wichita Mountains. I mean, you know, and Lord knows if they're that physically large, hell, their range could be massive, you know?
Yeah.
Well, the truth is we don't know anything about them, but people are reporting them. And, you know, my big problem is nobody's writing this stuff down.
Well, there's no telling how much stuff has been missed, forgotten, erased, whatever. People only started really reporting this stuff whenever the internet came around. Otherwise, it was on the investigator to seek out, through hearsay and find the witnesses and interview them in person or on the telephone.
Yeah.
But even by today's standards, with the internet that accessible, how many people, if they do have a Bigfoot encounter, are actually going to think far enough that, yes, I had a Bigfoot encounter and it needs to be reported. I'm going to get on the internet and find a place to do that.
Yeah. Well, they say that, a lot of people guesstimate that, only 1 out of every 10 Bigfoot sightings get actually reported. And even then, what percentage of that actually gets documented for public viewing? Probably even less,
And then take it one step further, you're talking about, these giant winged cryptids, dogmen, things like that. I mean, if somebody saw that, where are they going to report it?
Yeah, I know.
Are they going to think, hey, I'll look up a Bigfoot group and maybe report it to them? Like, they're not even going to make that connection.
That's why Bigfoot isn't even in the name of my group.
I have to ask, I've been thinking about this subject a lot recently, and I think you might be someone that has heard something.
Okay.
I'm going to look around here to make sure that it's safe.
I'll look too.
Have you heard any reports of the deer woman?
You've been looking at my page, haven't you?
I may have glanced at it, but I really have recently been thinking about that subject and had a conversation with someone. And whenever I saw your page, I thought, you know what? He might know something.
Well, I'll tell you what I know. Deer woman, I throw deer woman and little people into the same category.
Okay.
You know where Sequoia County is?
I do.
I had a guy call me not too terribly long ago. He wanted to remain anonymous, but he said that he used to work recently for the tribe out there. And he told me, he was a white guy. He wasn't, indigenous, First Nations. But he said he was working for that particular tribe out there. And he told me that it was standard policy at this one particular facility that they were working at to pull all the new hired guys aside and tell them, if you see a young, attractive Native American woman walking down the dirt road or the highway after dark, do not pick her up. And that was actually like an unwritten company policy that they warned him because it was so bad down there.
And it wasn't any sort of like hazing the new guy thing or anything like that. That was a question that I asked him too. And he said, if it was, there was no follow-up. There was no ha, ha, ha. It was just, whatever you do, don't do it. He said he'd never seen her, but he had talked to some of the other guys who had, and they knew better than to pick her up. And there's a lot of people that think that, that the deer woman won't hurt, a faithful man. Right.
But there's a lot of tribes out there that think that she will kill any man. Just probably not something you want to take a chance on. There's also been reports over by Canton Lake. There was another report just outside towards the north end of Anadarko of a deer woman sighting. And there's also, do you know where Ponca City is?
I do.
If you go south of Ponca City, back in the 1950s, there was a very dramatic deer woman sighting where they were actually having a some kind of dance, powwow, and this big storm come rolling in, and a lot of people had left the dance ground and had basically quit dancing, and they looked out there, and there was a deer woman dancing. And about the time somebody yelled, "Look at her feet," they could see that she had deer hooves. And she kept dancing for a couple more seconds, which normally when people call out something about their feet, they take off running according to tradition. This one didn't take off running, but she waited a few more seconds until a lightning bolt from the storm kind of backlit her, and then she just vanished.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy stuff. Salt Plains too. Salt Plains has some reports of deer woman out there.
The main story I heard, and this was probably back in my 20s, a friend of mine, a native friend of mine, told me that, again, it's just hearsay. They were told that at a local powwow, the powwow was over, a couple of guys that were still there who had been drinking were approached by a deer woman, and the result, I don't know what the interaction was, but both of their faces basically froze in a position of fright.
Really?
And just stayed frozen that way, like facial paralysis. They weren't killed or anything, but that was the story I heard. And
well, that's different.
Yeah, I'd never heard that before, and so I don't know how authentic it was or anything. Like I said, it was hearsay, but it really stuck with me over the years.
These benevolent spirits, I don't think they really care what race you are.
No, I don't think so.
So I think we all need to know about this stuff. Most of them, when they think about it, I've got a couple of friends. I got a buddy named Brandon that sometimes he enlightens me, on native perspective stuff, and he's real down to earth, and you can learn a lot from those guys. You listen to those guys; they're not just pulling your leg. So,
do you got some little people stories?
There's been some sightings down around Shawnee, south of Shawnee, and I know a guy that called me, and he reported that he had back in the 1950s, he saw one. Looked like he just kind of ran into it in the tall grass while he was out in the woods, and it saw him, and it took off running. And he said that it was actually dressed in what's the word I'm looking for? Deer skins, buck skins.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the craziest little people story that I heard was from a guy named Pete Buffalo of the Ponca Nation, and he told a story down at Hanabi just recently about it was like a 6-year-old, 5-year-old boy or something that got kidnapped by little people, and they basically used him to redirect some water, like a stream or a spring, some spring water. Using big stones, he lifted them for them and redirected the stream to flow through their little village in the woods. And once he was done with the project, they basically, and they fed him through the whole thing. And when they were done, they just returned him. And he'd been gone for like 3 days or something.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know the whole story, but I just heard that part of it, and he was unharmed except for being a little dirty. So, but it was made for an interesting story.
So do you keep record of all those kind of stories as well?
Yeah, I'm documenting them as best I can, what I have time for.
Well, if you're interested, I will submit to you my little people sighting.
Oh, really?
I had one. I don't talk about it very much. I've certainly never submitted it anywhere. So if you're interested, you can have it.
I would love to have it. Because, man, I'm telling you, there's a lot more going on out there than just Bigfoot.
So what's the absolute best report you've ever received?
I would say the one that just sticks with me the most happened right after. Well, I was kind of there when it happened, and that's kind of why it sticks with me. I was in Oklahoma City, technically Bethany, and I was working at a grocery store doing refrigeration work. I was working on their freezers and stuff. And at 23rd and Council. And I was getting my ticket signed off by the store manager, and this guy came in. And he is talking to the store manager. I just happened to be standing there. And he said, man, you ain't going to believe this. There was 2 women joggers over there at Lake Overholser that just saw a Bigfoot. And of course, my ears perked up. I was like, what? Sure enough. He's like, yeah, these 2 women were jogging along because around Overholser Lake, there's a road that goes pretty much all the way across it. If you want to, you could jog all the way around it. And these 2 women were on what would be the east side, and there's a residential housing area there. And they reported that they had seen this Bigfoot, broad daylight. It basically looked like getting into somebody's garbage or something. And I guess they saw it. It saw them. It freaked out, and it took off running to the north. And they said that it actually ran across Highway 66 and jumped the fence and went into Stinchcombe Wildlife Management Area, which was a lot more rough back then. This was probably 1995, 96. And I was just like, wow, So I was done. So I hopped in my service vehicle and I drove over there. And sure enough, the cops were there.
Wow.
The cops were actually there. And they had this area where these women had seen this thing taped off with tape, like a crime scene.
The local police.
Yeah, it was, I think it was the Bethany police. And I'm just like, holy crap. And then I went home that night. And I was sitting around drinking beer like all young men do and watching the news. That was, back when we didn't have much to watch on TV except the news. And it actually came on the news and somebody reported it. And of course, the news anchors at the time were, snickering and ho, ho, ho.
Oh, well, sure. Yeah. Of course.
But I was just like, well, how I was there, And, but yeah, that one to me, that was awesome. And that's when I found out about, Stinchcombe. And this was back before they had the hiking trail and all that in there. And basically, I started going back in there and exploring. And of course, that kind of, I stumbled on the tree structures back in there. And at the time, I didn't even know what a tree structure was. I mean, this was 1996, I didn't know what they was. At the time, I thought they were very curious. But I just figured that they were some homeless guys or something living over there, and they would just come in there and throw their tarp over the sticks and go to sleep or something,
Yeah.
And that's how we justify these things in our mind. But that is one of my favorite reports, just because it was like I happened to be there, and it was one of the things that kind of, just, I don't know. It's just kind of like started that fire of curiosity.
Probably propelled you into where you are now.
Yeah. Dumb luck, being in the right place at the right time in the middle of Oklahoma City metro area. Yeah, dumb luck.
Well, Brian, if somebody wants to report something, where can they find you?
Well, we're on Facebook, of course. You can just look up Red Dirt Cryptid Investigations. Same thing with YouTube. We got a YouTube channel where we go out and I'm a spoiler alert. We haven't found him yet, but we try to go out and put ourselves in certain places that have known activity, and or you can hit me up on Facebook Messenger, which seems to be the easiest. If you're on Facebook, you probably already have Messenger anyway, or you can do it the old school way, and you can reach us at reddirtcryptids@gmail.com.
Awesome. If you're listening to this on YouTube, after we're done, go over to Red Dirt Cryptid Investigations, hit the subscribe button, check out the videos. I was watching some of them today. I enjoyed it. Thanks again for joining me. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to more conversations with you in the future, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Absolutely. And if you want to reach out to me and possibly come on the show and share your own experience, you can do that. Bigfoot Crossroads@gmail.com. or go to bigfootcrossroads.com, where you can find all the contact information, links to social media, and a link to the merch shop. Get yourself a t-shirt, support the podcast. Every little bit helps. And until next time, remember, there's something in the